Hi, welcome back to Every Kid Can Play podcast. We are on episode 3. I'm super excited today. I get to have our first interview with one of my best friends, mentors, and just overall great guys. He's he's a master of many things, and we'll let him kind of talk to us about it. But we have Coach Chad Parks from Shawnee Heights High School Wrestling, and he's a teacher out at Shawnee Heights. Coach, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to Every Kid Can Play podcast, and just want to have you start off and tell us a little bit kind of how your journey started, from a small town in Oklahoma to kind of where you are now.
All right. Hey, thanks for having me on, Matt. I appreciate it. So I'm from Puska, Oklahoma. My dad is a wrestling coach, a National Hall of Fame coach. So I grew up in the sport. He coached football as well, so literally from the time I was a little kid, I was up in the wrestling room or I was in the football field, locker rooms, watching film, doing those kind of things. And then I have an older brother and younger sister, mom who stayed at home but took care of us. And then they also had several jobs. Both my parents are really hard workers, and so we cleaned offices at night, and again we painted, we mowed, we did a lot of stuff. So just I had a good family. I was pretty ornery growing up. Thankfully, sports kept me in line, and then had the opportunity to go on and wrestle in college. So I did that and needed to make a decision at that point of what I wanted to pursue. In the back of my mind, I always kind of wanted to be like my dad and be a teacher and a coach. And I saw how he impacted lives and things that he did. And so, as I was wrestling in college, I decided, that's what I want to do as well. And whether I'm coaching at the high school level or college level, whatever it is, I want to get out there and impact some lives. And so started coaching, and let's see, I think I just finished my 17th year overall as a teacher and a coach. I actually coached in college for a year, and then 17 years coaching, middle school, high school level, and then teaching the same.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I remember our first wrestling practice when you were my coach. I was a sophomore, and you walked in and threw tags down on the ground and told us we you weren't our parents, and made us start running. But this kind of goes into my next question. We talk about, especially as a coaching staff, building a positive culture in teaching and coaching. I know you've, stressed this a lot with our team in wrestling, but kind of where have your ideas and philosophies of building a positive culture, and where did that start? And then what do you think of as positive culture when we talk about wrestling and teaching?
Yeah, so I would say the ideas probably started like a lot of people. Most coaches coach how they were coached, right?
Yeah.
I'm real fortunate that I've had some great coaches in my life. I've actually had 4 wrestling coaches that are in the National Hall of Fame. Most people don't even get one, and somehow I got 4 of them, which also always brings the question in the back of my mind, like, dang, I should have been a better wrestler. Why wasn't I a better wrestler? I was pretty good, but I should have been even better. Anyway, so and then I had some great football coaches. Honestly, just some really good mentors. Growing up, some of the people I mowed for, painted for, I got to build relationships with and poured into my life. And then I'm also a student of the game, so constantly studying. I want to be a great coach, so I study coaching. What do other good coaches do? How do they build cultures? How do they build exceptional teams? So I think it started off with the coaches I have, and then taking bits and pieces of what I see other successful coaches doing and blending it all in. I would say number one, when it comes to culture, the absolute number one is love. And so relationships and love, I'm gonna kind of bundle those two together. There are many other things we think about as or as coaches that we're thinking about, teaching technique, working hard, being mentally tough, all those type of things. But I think it starts with building relationships with our athletes. Whenever we do that, that's how they know we love them. That's how we truly impact their lives, not just on the football field or on the wrestling mat or anywhere else. Okay. That's how we impact their lives at a level that they'll come back when they're 23, 24 and want to see you and talk to you and talk about the good old days. That's how, when you're currently coaching them, they're willing to push themselves to the absolute limit because they don't want to let coach down. They know that you care about them, and so they're willing to get in there and do whatever you say because they believe you, they trust you. So I think that's a big part of building culture, right? Not only as coaches loving our athletes, but teaching them to love each other. And you get a bunch of teenagers, a bunch of high school kids in the room together. It's not always going to be peaches and cream. It's not always easy, and sometimes, when we look at love, it's not soft. Sometimes when we think love, we're thinking like rainbows and sunshine and, these things that are, it's not that way. Because if somebody loves you, they're going to hold you accountable. If somebody loves you, they're going to do everything they can to help you reach your highest level as a human being or as an athlete. So, being in our room as a former athlete of mine and as a current coach on our staff, if a kid's doing wrong or a team's messing up, whatever, sometimes maybe we start practice over or start a drill over or whatever.
Right.
I mean, we're going to hold them accountable, but it's because we do care. If I let a kid slide, and I'm going to go like take this real quick to like an individual basis. Okay. Because every circumstance is different. As a team, there are things that we want them doing. We have expectations, but also sometimes you may have a kid that maybe as coaches we know, but nobody else on the team knows what he's going through.
Yep.
Maybe he's homeless right now, which we've had a kid on our team the last years that's been homeless at times. Maybe he doesn't even have food, whatever it is. There's a lot of situations behind the scenes that we know about and we can't publicly tell everyone. So there may be times that we have to treat that kid a little different, right? But we still have high expectations of that kid. So for everybody, we have these high expectations. We're going to push them to be their best. And we're not going to let them slide on the little things. If we do, those eventually become big things. And so if we let them slide on the little things, those can become big issues down the road. Same thing if we hold them accountable on the little things, those can lead to big results down the road. And then ultimately, because we do want them to be successful in life, taking care of those little issues now helps them down the road whenever they become an adult, whenever they become a productive part of society and get married and become a parent, or they're a CEO at an office, or maybe they're out there they're doing landscaping. Whatever it is, there's a wide variety of jobs, and you can and should be successful in all of them. So that's what we're pushing kids to do all the time.
Awesome. Yeah. And then going back, kind of piggybacking off of what you said about, holding kids accountable. And the one thing I love about our staff and our team is it doesn't matter if you're one of the 14 starters. It doesn't matter if you're one of the 10 starters this year in our girls team. It didn't matter if you were the best wrestler on our staff, on our team, or the worst wrestler. Everybody was getting the same coaching. Where did that philosophy kind of go, start? I know obviously, the numbers game is huge in wrestling. The more numbers you have, the better. But I think we go beyond that. And we just try to get there are kids on our team that wrestling doesn't need. You know what I mean? Like they need wrestling more than wrestling needs them. Just kind of talk about how, throughout the years, has your philosophy changed on that, or where have you, because, you always set stress to us, make sure we're talking to every kid, make sure we're working with every kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If I'm being honest, early in my coaching career, I don't know that I did that as well as I should. Well, I didn't do that as well as I should, right? So when I very first started coaching, I cared about every kid. But so there's a difference between being a transactional coach, which is I'm trying to get something out of you, and the transformational coach is I want to help you transform your life. Early in my coaching career, I cared about the kids, but there was also probably more of a transactional aspect in a way. But and maybe it wasn't even that. I would say I couldn't understand the kid who came in the room and didn't want to be varsity and didn't want to be a state champion, because the majority of my life, that those were my goals, right? I wanted to be a state champion. I want to be a national champion. I want to be an All-American. I believed in putting in the work to try to get there, whether you actually got there or not, putting yourself in the best position. So my first couple of years coaching, whenever a kid wasn't working at the level that I expected, in my mind, I would get so frustrated with them. And, sometimes I would tell them, try to get them to pick it up or whatever. And then it just hit me at some point. You know what? This is high school wrestling. And I believe that this applies to every level. In college, you got a job to do whenever you get in college. And it's a little different. Coaches still should care and love you and all those things. But let's talk high school, middle school, youth sports, whatever. Some kids don't care if they're ever a state champion. Some kids just want to be part of something positive. And as a coach, it's our job to help provide that, because it's not only going to help them, I would say, exceed their own mental limitations and expectations. It's not only going to help them become a better athlete, but it's also going to help them down the road. Now, I would rather a kid be in our room working out for 2 hours than to be out on the streets or getting in trouble somewhere. So, and then it's kind of looking at the whole human, looking at the whole person. Every single kid on our team is valuable. Every girl on our girls team, every boy on our boys team, our managers, everyone on the coaching staff. No one's above anybody else. So if you're the state champion in the room, or if you're the worst wrestler in the room, you matter because you're a human being. You're part of our team, and it takes every one of those on the team. It takes that JV kid wrestling a varsity kid and pushing them every day, or it takes the varsity kid going over and giving a word of encouragement to the JV kid who maybe he's only wrestled for a couple of years. Everybody benefits in that situation. But yeah, as coaches, it's one thing that we really try to do is make sure that we're getting in the ear of every kid at some point. We're building them up. And we come back to accountability. We're holding them accountable, making sure they do the right things, but ultimately making sure that they know that we care. We're humans, and I think every human needs to know that somebody cares about them. And right now we're in this COVID-19 time where a lot of people are sheltered in place, or we don't have as much interaction as we typically would. And we see the value in relationships. We see the value in getting to see someone face to face and get to talk to them. And I know that as an athlete, and part of it when I was growing up, my dad being my coach was different and difficult sometimes and great sometimes. But I'm going to use college as an example. My college coach would walk by and say something positive to me, and it could be something really little, like, hey, like the way you're working today or whatever. Man, it just shot my ego up, but I guess it did. Shot my ego up, but it made me more confident, right? It made me a more confident athlete. And guess what that resulted in? I worked harder because I knew coach cared. And if coach, and I also knew that coach, and I've had one coach in my life that I can think of that was a transactional coach, not a transformational coach. And it was miserable wrestling for him. And so you can learn something from everybody. So I knew, and not that I'm perfect with every kid, right? But I knew at that point, that's the kind of coach I never want to be. I don't want to just use a kid for what he can do. And then if he doesn't do it, I discard him. I want to make sure that the kid knows that I'm there for him to get his back. So as a coaching staff, that's what we try to do all the time. And I also, I need to say this, that when you have a coaching staff, every coach on your staff has a different personality. Use that, because every kid on the team has a different personality. So even though I love all the kids, I don't necessarily click with all the kids. Or there's some kids I click with more than others, right? That's just part of being a person. There are some people you jive with and some you don't as much. So one kid that I might be able to develop this great relationship and really reach and help take them to a new level, maybe you can't reach that same kid, but his workout partner right there with them every day might be a kid I can't make that connection with, but you can, and then you can help him reach the next level. So as coaches, each of us, because we have our own personality and strengths and weaknesses, whatever, we're able to kind of take certain kids under our wings and really help develop them. And then all of them know that we care and we got their backs. But I think as a coaching staff, that's a great thing to have too. Everybody be able to use their gifts. And if you have people that are working with you, let them shine, let them use their gifts.
Yeah. And I think one of my favorite stories about, you're talking about the varsity state champion or top wrestler on our team. I remember when Jake Patterson was a senior, and he was the first person to go as if he saw somebody near him struggling. He went over and he was helping that kid. It didn't matter how good he was. He was making sure the kid was getting it. And that's speaks highly of him. And I think speaks highly of, the way he was raised and the way he was coached through you. And, Jake was never one of my guys. Him and I got along, but he was one of your guys. But you could just see him go over, and didn't matter if he was 0-20 or, one of the varsity guys. He was always there to make sure that those kids were getting help too, which I think is a reflection on you and us as coaches.
Yeah, and part of having a good program is, of course, it's coach-led in a way, but not just being coach-led, right? Being athlete-led as well. So when our athletes have been empowered, and we take the ones that are good leaders like Jake and we empower them, then they have the freedom to go and do that. And that goes a long ways, man, because I guarantee if you're a JV kid and you're struggling, and Jake Patterson's a senior state finalist, one of the best kids in the state, and he walks over and he tells you something encouraging or shows you how to do a move, you're probably going to listen and be excited about it.
Yeah, I'd listen too. He makes me a better coach too, just watching him, the way he works out.
No doubt.
So, obviously this is talking about, every kid can play. And we hang out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and work out and stuff, so you kind of understand. My passion is working with kids with special needs. And being as a teacher in PE and as a coach, I think kids with special needs were put on this earth to bring joy to this world. I think God had a purpose when he created kids with special needs and made sure that they were there to bring joy to this world. Can you kind of talk about a time that maybe you had a special needs kid in class or somebody? I know you talked about having a family member,
Mhm.
but just kind of talk about how they touched your heart and what that has done for you and through your life and your journey.
Yeah, yeah. I have a cousin who has spina bifida. So when he was a baby, ended up being paralyzed. And the kid he's brilliant. I mean, he's brilliant. His mind works great, but his body doesn't work great, right? So he's in a wheelchair, and he's just like one of those people that always like has brought joy to me every time I see him. But so every year Thanksgiving, my parents always hold their Thanksgiving. And well, when I was a high school wrestler, a college wrestler too, and it's also right around my birthday, for me a lot of times that was cutting weight, and so I might enjoy
Yeah.
a little Thanksgiving meal, but I was also working out a lot to keep my weight under control. So this has always stuck out in my mind. So I remember his name was Robert, and so Robert was down. We had Thanksgiving dinner and stuff. And a little bit later, I was going to go out and run, and Robert asked if he could run with me. I'm like, sure, bud. So we go out, and so I'm pushing him in his wheelchair, and we're running. And I don't know how far we are. I mean, we're probably like a mile and a half in, something like that. And all of a sudden, it just like dawned on me. I could hear myself breathing hard, but I could also hear him breathing hard. And he was like literally breathing as hard as I was, and he was just riding in the wheelchair, but he could hear me doing it, and so he was doing it too. And it just clicked for me at that moment, like, man, we're in this together. Like, um, Robert doesn't have the freedom to get up and walk around. He doesn't have the freedom to get out here and jog like I do, but he loves sports. Like I told you, he's brilliant. Like you could just read the back of a baseball card and he would be able to tell you the stats on it. I mean, he would like word for word on it, right?
It's awesome.
Yeah, the kid, he just loves sports. But so for me, like we already had a connection, but it was even more, and it made me grateful to experience that, grateful for my own health, and then grateful to see the joy that he had in in a situation that I guess some people would that they could have a different attitude in that situation. So that's one. Another is being a PE teacher for a number of years now, 17 years. I've had a lot of kids come into class that have special needs, and I've developed some great relationships. We try to make sure that we are always adapting things, and you do adaptive PE, so we're trying to do adaptive PE as PE teachers as well. There's a kid named Sean a few years ago, and I love Sean, man. Again, this is a kid, he's in a wheelchair, got a huge smile, and almost every single day I would get my class going, and then Sean and I would do an activity. So I would have him work out. We do some physical therapy stuff, and he could use his arms fairly well, and so we'd be over there working out, and then I'd set up like a smaller basketball goal. We play basketball, and Sean was good, man. Sometimes usually they're just schooling me playing basketball. I'm a wrestler for a reason, terrible basketball. I'm just school, and he thought it was hilarious, right? Just cracking up at me the whole time. I had a kid, Dion, a couple years ago, the same thing. And man, you said earlier, but there are some people, and I almost want to say, I mean, I don't know, like to the extreme, but there are some people that just like bring a light, right? They walk into a room and it just is a light. And that's how Dion was, man. When he walks into a room, like his smile, I mean, it would make everybody in the room smile. So every single day, he loved PE. So Dion would walk into PE just pumped. And as soon as I saw him, no matter how my day was going, it immediately got better. If I was having a good day or a bad day, man, that sunshine walked in the room and it was immediately better. Same thing. Me and Dion, I'd get class going. We'd work out together. He'd be involved in the activities that the class was doing, and class really involved him well. And then there are times that, me and Dion just sat there and played catch the entire class and things like that. So that brings joy to my heart, even just thinking about it. Brought joy to my heart whenever I had him in class. And anyone that has an opportunity to work with anybody that has special needs, no matter what it is, I think you understand that on some level. And for you, I'm so grateful that you have this passion, for adaptive PE and what you do, and knowing that every kid can play. And that, Dion is an example of one of those kids. Sean, an example of one of those kids that they have the right to play, they can play, they love it, and they fit into our class just like every other kid does.
Yeah. And, and I think that was kind of, when I first started, that was kind of our journey, was trying to get everyone to understand, and that, it doesn't matter what's going on, what physical limitations they have, but, it's not their job to get, I've the whole cliche, they're not my problem,
Mm,
no, they're your problem. They're on your class roster. They're in your class. We got to work together and figure out a plan.
yeah.
And I think that's very important. So kind of shifting things, a lot of people who will watch this podcast know you, know me, but you wrote a book not too long ago and called Game Changing Moves. Kind of talk about your journey writing your book, and then kind of the processes that
Mm.
you had to go through. And I know you talked about, it took quite a bit to get that thing going.
Yeah. So I read a lot. It's funny, I did not read a lot growing up. Once I became an adult and of course studying and trying to be a good coach and teacher and leader, all those things, I read. And if people don't read, make sure you do. You're forced to read when you're younger, but whenever you get to choose what you want to read and if you want to be great at something, you can't experience enough in life on your own. We have a number of experiences, but man, gather people's experiences and their wisdom as well. And you can do that quickly through reading. So there was this thing in the back of my mind that thought like, maybe one day I'll write a book when I'm in my 50s or 60s. It certainly wasn't a couple of years ago. I had started writing a blog, didn't even read blogs. It wasn't part of my reading that I did, but I was doing some leadership stuff and I had a few people say like, hey, you should, write a blog and teach this stuff so other people can know it. And I was like, again, I don't even read blogs, so I don't know why I would do that. And eventually, after enough people said it, I just thought, you know what? I've always been a pretty decent writer, so I think I'm going to give it a try. So I wrote a couple blogs, put them on social media, the power of social media. They started to get spread around. People liked them. And I mean, there were times I might be like at Walmart, right? A random place. And somebody would be like, hey, I read your blog. And they start telling me how it impacted them, whatever. So I kind of made it a thing. And I decided if I'm going to do something, I want to do it well. So I began to study what, top bloggers, what are they doing? How do they format their blogs? Realized that some of my favorite authors also had blogs. So I started reading their blogs. Long story short, I just made this decision. I'm going to write 2 blogs a week, no matter what, whether I put them out or don't put them out. I'm going to write 2 blogs a week and I'm going to do this consistently. And I put the majority of them out. But you do that over a couple of years, you end up with a lot of information. You end up with a lot of writing and you become a better writer in the process. I always try to keep my blogs between probably 1,200 words and 2,000 words. People's attention spans, including mine, are not getting longer. And so I want to be efficient with my words, but yet make an impact. So I did that over time. Well, now comes the book, and it's kind of a funny story. I wrote a kid's story, all right, and my book's not a children's book, but I wrote a kid's story. It was over Christmas, and it's called The Christmas Chicken, and it was just meant to be kind of funny because my wife and children every year over Christmas they make sugar cookies, and so I think I maybe come back from wrestling practice or I was coming back from someplace to work out, and I come in and they're doing their sugar cookies, and of course they have like Christmas tree cutouts and Santa Claus and things like that. Well, my son Luke has a chicken. They had a cutout that wasn't even part of this Christmas collection, but we had it and he wanted to use it. And so Lori's like, he had to make his Christmas chicken. So I'm laughing and it just sparked this idea, right? So I go to my office, sit down, and I write a whole story about the nativity scene from the viewpoint of the animals that were there. And the Christmas chicken was one of the animals. So I write it up. Takes me like 30 minutes. I come upstairs, I read it to the family, and my wife is like, that's honestly probably one of the best kids stories I've ever heard. We need to publish that. It's better than any of the kids books that we have. I'm like, really? And she said, yeah. So I was like, oh, I don't know. I'll reach out to some people. I have another friend who's highly connected, just super successful businessman, and the guy's connected everywhere. And we had talked a number of times about some of my blogs. Anyway, so I messaged him and I said, hey, do you know anyone who, helps put manuscripts together, helps with publishing, anything like that? He says, actually, I do. Let me connect you. So he connects me to this guy via email. But he tells this guy all the things I write about, right, that are in my blog. Not about the Christmas chicken. Tells him all the things I write about. Says I'm interested in writing a book and we should meet up. So I go meet up with this guy. And, well, I find out in this process as this guy and I begin to email a little bit. He's helped like multiple New York Times bestsellers write books and things like that. And all of a sudden I'm like, I cannot take this dude to Christmas Chicken, right? Even though it might be a good kid's book, I'm not taking that to him. So I'm going to take him, just tell him about the things I write in blogs. So I meet up with him in person in a coffee shop. I tell him, he says, sounds great. This is during wrestling season, right? This is over Christmas break. So in late December, he tells me, okay, I know that you want to do this. I know this is your busy time, but if you don't just jump in, you're probably not going to get it done. So I want you to have a manuscript to me by spring break. And all of a sudden I'm like, all right, I got 2 months of wrestling season left. I'm super busy every day. Let's see if I can get this done. And I only have a book, right? I just have like these blogs I've written. And so throughout this process, I just began to study, how do you write a manuscript? I don't even know how to write a manuscript. All right. So I'm going to look, what format is it? Every book I'm reading, I'm looking like, what's the intro like? What's the body like? What is, is there a, somebody else that, wrote a foreword? Basically just kind of looking at the layout and structure of the book and how would I want my book to look? And long story short, over spring break, I tell my wife, okay, you got to take care of the kids for a couple of days. And we have 4 children. I'm locking myself in my office in the basement and I'm going to write this book. And I put the entire book together in 2 days. Now that sounds crazy, but I already had all this content from writing twice a week for 2 years. I just knew in my mind what I wanted to do, the things I wanted to be in the book, looking at, analytics, Google data, things like that. I could see who has shared what blogs the most, which have been open the most and read and most popular. So I make sure that I involve those in there if they fit the structure that I wanted in the book. I had to write an intro. I had to come up with the name of the book. I had to write an outro, or an ending to the book, all these things. So I put them all together into a manuscript. I go in, I meet with this guy. I'm super nervous because now all of a sudden this is getting real. And you're putting your own ego on the line at the same time, because I think I'm a pretty decent writer, but this guy has worked with, best-selling authors. So I give him the manuscript. He says, okay, I'm going to read this. I'll get back with you in a couple weeks. 2 weeks later, calls me. We meet up again. And now I'm just like, okay, I hope he liked it. But part of me was like, be ready for him to say like, dude, you need to stick with coaching because writing is not your thing or whatever. We go in, we sit down, and he literally starts it off by saying, I'm very black and white with everything I do. I want you to know that. I also get manuscripts sent to me all the time, and the vast majority of them are terrible. This is not that. This is really good when you get it out to the world. And so now I stopped sweating because I was sweating at that point.
Right.
But now I'm almost sweating because really okay, what do I do? It gives me some suggestions. Here's some editing things. You need to add another chapter on this. So go write that. And you got to find a publisher. That's not his job. That's not part of what he does. So right. I went and I took his suggestions. I edited, I added an additional chapter, and then sent it back to him. He says, great. And, I don't know if this is a God thing or what this is, but, you hear these stories of people whose manuscripts have been some great books. Manuscripts have been rejected 30 times and this and that. I didn't even know where to start. I mean, I'm a middle school PE teacher and high school wrestling coach who has some influence in his area, but not like these big time authors. But they all had to start somewhere. So I just sent out an email to some people in the wrestling world that I know are pretty connected and said, do any of you guys know any book publishers or someone who could help lead me in the right direction? 2 days later, an acquaintance who I'm now friends with, but an acquaintance at the time who was a fan of my blogs, emails me back and says, hey, look at this trail of emails. Everybody says you should contact this company in Nebraska, Cross Training Publishing. They do almost all the publishing for FCA, Fellowship Christian Athletes. And they publish books for big-time college coaches, NFL players, things like that. So I'm like, all right. I reach out to this company. The owner of the company calls me. We talk on the phone. He sounds interested. I want to see your manuscript. I send it to him, and I don't hear back for like 2 or 3 weeks. So I'm asking the guy to help me, and he says, listen, you got a hold of this guy unsolicited. He didn't get a hold of you. You got a hold of him. You are not a priority right now. He's probably publishing multiple other books, but hang in there. Okay. So I go like another week or two, and then I contact him again. He says, yeah, go ahead and call the guy. So I call him, and we talk, and I get off the phone. I tell my wife, I think he's going to publish it, but I'm not sure if he's going to publish it. Like, it was almost like, sometimes you talk to, or you hear a politician talking and they answer the question without answering the question. Right. That's kind of how I felt. And I'm like, did I hear that right? Or did I hear what I wanted to hear? Or I'm not sure. So long story long, he ends up getting back with me and says, hey, we're going to publish your book. Here's what we're doing. We're moving on it. And honestly, that's when the work began. I did not realize, thank goodness, I use Grammarly now. And I just got to say this, I'm from Oklahoma. And even though I'm a pretty good writer, I probably often write how I speak. And I'm an Okie, right? So I speak like, so spelling has never been my strong suit. Thank goodness, we have spell correct and things like that. But so the editing process took forever. I mean, he has somebody that's going in, they're sending me this stuff, and you got to correct a million things, and I'm correcting them, sending it back, and then they edit more. And you want to put out a really good product, because once it's actually in print, there's no going back at that point. So we spend a long time in the editing process. They finally get it out there. And just because I have a lot of awesome family and friends, and like I said, it's kind of a small sphere of influence, a lot of people bought the book and ended up being an Amazon, not like a New York Times bestseller, but Amazon #1 bestseller, and it still does pretty well. And it's opened up a door to go and speak to a lot of people. A number of teams use it, high school, college teams. It's been pretty crazy and awesome. But the number one, and I tell you what, and I was told this in terms of true, you don't make money as an author. Now, if I wrote a big time book that some giant company wanted to buy the rights to initially put it out there, then they pay you a lot ahead of time. The level I'm on, you don't make a lot of money. It's not why you do it. But it opened a lot of doors for me to go and speak into people's lives. And like I said, it's made a little bit of money, and the speaking has made more money than the book. But the number one thing is there was a lot of wisdom shared with me throughout the years from all these great coaches and mentors I had. And I wanted to make sure that it didn't die with me whenever I pass away someday. I want to make sure that my athletes know it when we talk to them about it. I want to make sure that my own children can read this book and see these things that Dad did, and these lessons that were taught. And then on a broader scale, these lessons that I was taught from other people. And I often share in like true stories and things like that, but story format, these things can be passed on to others to impact their life. Because if you learn something and you have knowledge or you have wisdom, and you just keep it to yourself, it's pretty selfish. You need to make sure others get to know it, and you teach whenever you have the opportunity. And the bigger your platform is, essentially, I guess, the more people that you're going to be able to reach, and they're going to be able to hear those messages.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to wrap this up with a few questions. So the first one is, if you had to tell someone to read one chapter in your book, what chapter would it be?
Man, I would say if I was just going to narrow it down to one chapter, okay, it would probably, and I have my book right here in front of me I
have mine too. Yours.
Yeah. So there's a couple, and honestly, I can't decide. Control the controllables, because I think that's something that we really need to learn in our life. Keys to becoming a champion. Those were 5 things, and I'm not just talking in sports, but in life. 5 things that I was asked at one point by a world-class, world champion jiu-jitsu professor and instructor, as he was working with his athletes at his academy. If you could narrow down all of your wrestling experiences and coaching, whatever, what are a few things that you would tell your athletes to help them be successful on the mats and in life? And I narrowed it down to those 5 keys. All right, that's really important, I think. The chapter that I probably speak on the most is called Lessons from the Custodian, and things I learned from a custodian that worked at our school. And man, they apply to almost every area of life. And so I think that one is really powerful as well. Small town values I might throw in there as well, because those are just great life values for all humans.
And I think right now in this time we're in, I think You Can Choose Your Mood is a good one too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
There's so many negative things going on, and you can still, you can be down on yourself, or you can decide to be positive and impactful.
Maybe I'll make that my next podcast. So now that you said it.
There you go. Let's see. What was your highlight of our wrestling season this year?
2. One was having our girls team. So we've always had girls wrestle for us, and they were part of the overall wrestling team, but they had to practice with boys. They had to wrestle against boys. In Kansas, like most states, it was just a wrestling program. There was no division. There wasn't a girls team and a boys team. Like in basketball, you have a girls program, you have a boys program. This is the first year that our High School Athletic Association voted to have both. So it was our first time having an all-girls program. We had 18 girls that came out. We ended up having 16 girls that finished the season. And it was good, man. It added to our culture in the room. It really did. As a coach, it was so refreshing. And a couple of the girls have experience. A couple of girls wrestled on our team previously and had grown up wrestling. The vast majority had never even seen a wrestling match. And it was so refreshing to see these athletes walk into the room. And many of them were from different circles of life, right? They didn't even hang out together in the school. And just bond within a couple of weeks because of all the physical and mental training and everything that we're going through and the shared experience. Seeing athletes who don't know the sport, so they don't have any of these preconceived notions or bad habits, literally just do what we tell them and watch that go out there and work and see that work actually out there on the mat.
Never had a wrestling season where we've had so many giggles at the same time.
And that was
and
another
just brought this, okay, it's not this serious, we can have fun while we're here in practice, and it's okay to laugh at yourself.
Absolutely. There was a lot of that, man. A lot more giggling than I've ever heard in the wrestling room. But at the same time, yeah, it taught us those lessons. And the girls worked really hard at the same time, which I think pushed the boys team. They saw how hard the girls were working. They went harder. And then that they impacted each other back and forth like that. The girls saw how hard the boys were working, so they would work even harder. So that was a huge highlight for me. And then the other one was, we've had a lot of successful seasons, and I think we were 14-2 in duels this year. That was good. We won a bunch of tournaments. But I think the big thing with that is it was the youngest team we've ever had. And, we started 2 freshmen, 9 sophomores, 1 junior, and 2 seniors. So the youngest team we've ever had, and to see them succeed, not only on the map, but like to really become a team and to care about each other and to lift each other up, hold each other accountable. When some people were falling off, these guys were taking care of it. They were building them back up, or they were making them step up their game. And so I'm so excited about the next couple of years as they become even better leaders in our room. So those are 2 big highlights, man. The girls program, and then just seeing how our team grew and developed from youth into just really becoming leaders.
Who was your hero growing up?
I would say probably my number one hero is my dad, and maybe a lot of people would say that about their dads. I don't know. And not that we always had a great relation. There were some rocky times because he was my coach and I was a turd sometimes growing up, but seeing how my dad worked, his work ethic is off the charts. We would be lifting weights. I lifted with him since I was a little kid, and he would just modify it. But, we might be lifting weights at 6 a.m., get down, run home, have breakfast, and then we don't even get back home until 9 o'clock at night because we painted and mowed all day long. And my breaks were going to wrestling practice or going to baseball practice. For most people, that was like their workout. For me, those are my breaks. But when my dad dropped me off, I had like a private technique wrestling coach. He would drop me off, and then he was back at work. And then to see the way he had that same work ethic coaching football and coaching wrestling, impacting kids, we grew up, there was a lot of poverty. And so there are many nights we had kids over for dinner at our house. There were times my dad paid the electric bill for families and no one knew about that. To this day, no one knows about that. Probably the first time it's ever been spoken right now, because he saw a need and took care of it just behind the scenes. Kids that couldn't afford school clothes, he went and bought them school clothes, and we didn't have money. We didn't have very much money. We had me and my little sister, my older brother's a decent amount older than me. So a lot of years when he was graduated, I had a cousin that lived with us. She's like a sister to me. So my parents are taking care of kids and scraping by. But my dad was still like the most giving person. So all those things together, I would say kind of made him my hero. If I was going to look at a sports hero, I'm a diehard OU fan, but Barry Sanders was like, I wanted to be Barry Sanders in football, and then in wrestling, I've had a bunch of heroes. There was a time where when I was younger, it was John Smith, Ken Lacrosse, and those again are Oklahoma State guys. But we grew up, even though I'm an diehard OU football fan, even more today, we grew up closer to Oklahoma State. So I got to see those guys more in person. And anyway, so there were a lot of athletes I looked up to, but just as a person overall, probably my dad. And then we had a neighbor across the street, Carl Core, who was like a grandfather to me, and I really looked up to Carl as well.
You can definitely see your dad imprinting you. You talked about providing stuff for families. You used to buy me tennis shoes, my sister tennis shoes, you and your wife. And then I know we still do that to this day where, kid can't afford something and we pitch in and do what we can. So I can definitely see his imprint on you for sure.
So,
Um, something that you aren't good at but wish you were good at.
oh, so I'm not good at singing, and I wish I was, because man, I love music, and I love almost all kinds of music, especially soul music, like R&B or soul music. And like I always say, like, if you could see my soul, that's probably the way, like, if a great R&B singer is singing or a soul singer is singing, that's what my soul looks like. But I can't sing a lick, man. I wish I could. So yeah, so that would be my number one thing, like probably playing an instrument, but especially singing.
Yeah. So the last one is, we're in this uncharted territory, or we're getting ready to walk into summer. Not sure what summer's going to look like for athletes and coaches and stuff like that. What advice do you have for athletes that going to come in, with a summer where, typically, they're football, they're working out 4 or 5 days a week, wrestling, you guys are doing 3 days of workouts and conditioning. What are some advice you can give to athletes just getting ready to walk into the summer and, in this uncharted territory to get ready for the season?
Yeah. A couple things. One is the off season is where you make a lot of growth. Okay. So no matter, and even like right now, this is kind of like an off season for us, because all spring sports got canceled. Right. And so there's no staying where you are. There's growth, there's stagnation. You can't just kind of hang out and have homeostasis and that balance all the time as an athlete. And so you have to make it your journey. If you want to be really good, it's got to be your journey, or if you want to grow and get better, which means you take full responsibility for making yourself better. And the things that you can be doing, you can always be working out. So ideally, we will be in the weight room this summer. We'll be in the wrestling room this summer. Football teams will be out getting to practice and prepare for football this summer, ideally. And I think it's going to happen. Are there going to be limitations to this? Are we going to start later? Are we going to have limitations on numbers? I mean, yeah, those are all unknowns, right? Things that we don't know about. But you can control working out. And like you and I, we work out together 3 days a week. Fairly limited. I mean, I'm fortunate we have some stuff. I mean, I'm a teacher, so I was able to bring some stuff home from the wrestling room and stuff like that. But still, we get creative, right? You don't even have to be creative. You can do push-ups and squats, and you can go out for a run. You can do those things and know that it is going toward your personal growth. You can get on and watch highlight videos of yourself or other great athletes that are in your position or in your sport or in your weight class. You could be doing those things. You can do mental training. All right. You can always work on yourself as a human being. And I believe the better human being you are, the more successful you're going to be in sport. So you can work on yourself by reading books that appeal to you. All right. By trying to be a kind person and helping out in society wherever you can, whether that's in your home or on a greater scale. So those are all things that we can be doing. And it's almost like if an athlete, like if you have an injury, and man, I've dealt with some injuries and it's terrible. I hate it. To this day, I hate it. But whenever I'm working with an athlete who's injured, one of the first things I tell them is, don't focus on all the things you can't do. Focus on the things you can. All right. We can't control the thoughts that like just randomly come up into our minds, but we can control what rents space and stays there. And you have to be intentional about it. So, and you can't get down on yourself about it, but if this thought comes in our mind, we're going to gently let it pass through. We're going to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and we're going to try to fill our mind on purpose with a lot of good. And so we're going to focus on the things that we can do. So this summer, if it looks different than normal, then that's something literally you have to write down. What are the things I'm in control of? What are the things I can do? I can work out every single day, the things I just listed. And man, if everything works out like we hope it's going to work out, then how joyous is it going to be whenever we're all back together and we're training again? And I would say that if it does work out that way, or even if it's modified, whatever, but we all get to come back together and train, that we don't take for granted that time we have together, that we don't go back in with the same attitudes that we left. And even if you're trying to be in the moment, be grateful, right? So for our wrestling team, that's one of our mottos and something we developed this year and everybody bought into, and 100% get gratitude, effort, and toughness. All right. But even when you're trying to be grateful and you're trying to be in the moment, sometimes you're just not, you just take it for granted. And so when something like this happens, like this COVID-19, and it's taken away from you, you really, really value things. And you realize, I wish I would have been more in the moment. As a coach, I wish I would have been even more caring with some of these kids and be in their life and letting them know that I care about them, those type of things. So I hope that when we all get back together in the summer and we get to start training again, that we don't roll back in with this is just another thing I got to go do. This is something I get to do, and I value it, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to give it full effort, and I'm going to be like fully in the moment every single day. So that's kind of my advice, and where I hope we all are as coaches and as athletes.
Awesome. Coach, thanks for coming on here with me. I think we could probably talk for the next 3 hours and still probably have a ton of more things to talk about. So maybe we'll have to do another one sometime. Man, I love you to death, and I appreciate you. Everybody, this has been Every Kids Can Play podcast. I'll link all of Coach Parks' stuff. He's got his own podcast as well. So we'll link all that stuff in the description. And until next time, this has been Every Kids Can Play podcast. And a reminder, every kid deserves the right to play.